Hello, and welcome to the Steps to Happiness show on Soul Livity TV. I'm your host, Teresa Greco, happiness coach, author, editor, writer, educator, and Reiki master. Are you ready to feel the love, peace, and happiness that exists within you? Then the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, my guests and I explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices that can help realign you with the happiness within you. The happiness principle for today's show is mindset is a key to your happiness. Can what you believe about yourself impact your success or failure? Can your mindset play a significant role in determining how happy and fulfilled you feel in your life? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing on the show today. Our mindset is a set of beliefs that shape how we make sense of the world and ourselves. It influences how we think, feel, and behave in every given situation. And as many of you know, some of the beliefs we have about ourselves are not always positive, encouraging, or uplifting. Enter limiting subconscious beliefs. They come in various forms, and they possess the power to sabotage our ambitions, destroy our self-worth, and diminish the overall quality of our life. Did you know that we live 95% of the day from the subconscious mind? Yes, 95% of what we do every day comes from habit, which includes many actions we don't even think about because we've been doing them day after day and maybe for years. This includes bodily functions like your heart beating, breathing, and digesting your food, to automatic movements like your morning routine, driving to work where you ask yourself, how did I even get there? Riding a bike, swimming, and playing an instrument. All of these automatic actions are all guided by one of the most powerful inner forces that drive human behavior, the subconscious mind. That leaves us with a meager 5% to consciously change our thoughts, beliefs, and actions and become aware of what our subconscious mind has been doing and reacting to every single day. However, from a spiritual perspective, we know that there's the brain and then there's the mind. The mind is who we really are, our original nature, our higher intelligence. And over-identifying with your internal limiting thoughts and often false thoughts about ourselves prevents us from connecting to our true identity. According to Michael Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul, the voice inside your head, your inner roommate, as he calls it, is the main obstacle to realizing your true self. And because this voice speaks to you as the voice in your brain, you've mistakenly come to believe that it is you. But it is not you. The essence of who you are is always perfect, whole, and complete. And with consistent inner observation, you learn the important lesson that you don't have to believe. And in fact, you should not believe what the voice inside your head is telling you. In fact, your true spiritual growth depends on you not believing it. Your internal monologue is obsessed with meaningless things, with the average person having 48 to 60 thoughts per minute, and only 6 to 8 of those thoughts being conscious ones. That's a lot of meaningless thoughts. Most of what the brain says is like a waste of time and energy, is fear-based, negative, and even harmful. Therefore, recognizing that we are not the organ of our brain can help us to stop identifying with a belief system in our subconscious brain that acts as a computer program that's running our everyday lives. By siding with our spiritual selves, we are able to use the knowledge of our greatness and power to help us to identify when our mental and emotional self aren't aligning with the truth of who and what we really are, and to use it to help us to make the changes we need to realign ourselves with the truth of who we are, which is powerful creators capable of designing and manifesting the life we were truly meant to live. With that being said, I'd like to welcome my first guest on the show. He's a mental wealth coach and the host of the Mental Wealth podcast. Kaylor Betts, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. I appreciate it.
Kaylor, can we start off by you sharing a little bit about your personal story that led you to do the work that you're doing today, please?
So I'm going to give you the cliff notes because I could go on for a long time, and I know we have limited time, and I want to make sure that for the audience and whoever's listening and watching that we're bringing as much value as possible. But really what you need to know about my story is I spent the majority of my life. I'm turning 33 in a couple of weeks or a few weeks. And I spent the majority of my life with a really strong desire to achieve my highest potential, with a really strong desire to achieve my highest quality of life. And I think that came from sports. I was really into sports, and I just was all about achieving highest potential in every regard, whether it's a sport, whether it's, well, maybe not in school. I didn't do very well in school, but it's because I was disinterested. So in what I was learning. So I had this innate desire to always achieve with anything I wanted to. I wanted to achieve my highest potential in every area. And obviously, I wanted to achieve my highest potential in my life. I wanted to thrive, my greatest good, my highest purpose. And I knew that that was possible, but I was in a battle with my mind. I was in a battle with my mind, my whole life. I spent, or most of my life. And it's because well, part of it was my conditioning from just my upbringing. And my parents are incredible people. But they did the best they could with what they had, and my childhood wasn't perfect, and I built some insecurities and core wounds and all that stuff. And then part of it, then that led me to live a life daily where my habits and my lifestyle didn't add up to my highest quality life, and it actually started to, most of which was it's all my fault, and what I did every day on a daily basis contributed to being in that battle with my mind, and it was really tough. I struggled, and then I just had like an aha moment where I just was like, this is enough. And it was when I went to a Western clinical professional, and really all they had to offer me was, or Western clinical professionals, I should say, and really all they had to offer me was some talk therapy and some medication. And although those things can have their place, I thought there's no reason why this is the only answer. There's got to be more. So I got obsessive about human optimization, mindset, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, what I had to do to get to my highest quality life, and that's the journey I've been on in the last quite a few years.
And we do need to take ownership of our life, of our wellness, rather than giving it over to doctors or giving it over, which we do. We're looking outside ourselves for answers, when the answers really, all of them can be answered if we go inward and ask ourselves the important questions that we have to ask. So what are some of the questions that you began asking about why your life was going the way that it was, and that it wasn't serving you, although you had the intentions that we all have to live our true purpose and full potential, to be thriving and all of that? What kind of questions did you have to ask yourself to become aware of the operating system that you had been living? by the paradigms, the conditioning, the programming, all of that?
Yeah, look, I had to just look in the mirror and I had to be very honest with myself. And I had to really take ownership, like you said. I had to take personal responsibility and take my focus away from the external world, right? Because I thought all my problems were because of the external world. I thought, well, this happened and it's because of this, because of that. And it's like, no, no, no. Look, not everything is our fault that happens to us, but it is our responsibility and we are the only ones that can heal. So we got to focus on what we can control and then let go of what we can't control and not focus on it, right? So that's what I did is I took an honest look in the mirror and I said, I looked at my lifestyle and it's so funny because, well, it's not funny at all, but
Mhm.
it's interesting that so many people are depressed, anxious, confused, lost, hopeless, overwhelmed, burnt out, can't focus, low energy, lacking purpose, lacking confidence. And if you really look at their lifestyle, I mean, they're drinking alcohol consistently or doing drugs or eating a bunch of processed food. They're not fulfilling daily obligations that they know they should be doing. They're 3 years behind on their taxes because they keep pushing it off, and they're watching porn all the time and seeking pleasurable things nonstop and just doing what they feel like doing in the moment rather than committing to their long-term values and commitments. They haven't even clarified their long-term values and commitments. And when I say they, there's no shame in that.
Mhm.
That was me. So I had to
Mhm.
just take an honest look, and I realized in that moment that where I was at in my life was literally a direct result of everything I was doing day in and day out, all my actions, all my decisions, and I was a result of that pattern that I was living in. And I ended up just taking ownership and saying, I got to change this pattern. And I started small, I thought big, and I clarified where I wanted to get to, and I grew fast. And it was the
Mhm.
best decision I've ever made in my life. It's the hardest because our subconscious mind only cares about our survival and safety. It doesn't care about our happiness. It just wants you to stay in that pattern because it may not make you happy, but at least you know what you're going to get. It's familiar. It loves to predict the future. So you have to do everything in your being to shift and say, nope, no more of these things. And again, start small and then grow fast. And that's ultimately what brought me here today.
Mhm. And so that's actually led me into my question for you is that today's happiness principle on the show is mindset is a key to your happiness. A key that, as you know, we have our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual self. That our mindset is one aspect to ourselves that we do need to become more aware of what and what it's communicating to us every day, that all aspects are constantly communicating, and that we have to understand the language of how that self is communicating to us, and our mental self is doing that all the time. And so if it is a key to our happiness, how how can we then use it? As you said, our subconscious mind is not concerned with our happiness, but my belief on happiness is that it is our essential nature. We are happy at our core. The world just takes us away from that. So it's just a matter of us always coming back, removing the blocks that are preventing us from feeling the happiness that's always there inside of us. But if our subconscious mind doesn't care about that, how can we, in your opinion, then, if mindset is a key to our happiness, how have you maybe changed? What kind of changes did you have to make with your mindset in order to be happier?
Yeah, that's a good place to go next. So it all comes down to beliefs. And it's so unfortunate that most people graduate after 12 years of schooling here in North America, at least. They 18 years of, getting taught by their parents and getting taught in the school system, and they don't understand literally the most important thing that you could teach. There's nothing more important than this. They don't understand and haven't been taught this fundamental principle about life. And that is that your beliefs are running the show. Your beliefs are creating your circumstances in your life, right? And not only that, but they are the code that our subconscious mind runs off of, right? And the subconscious mind is 95% of our ideas, our thoughts, our emotions, and actions, which is crazy, meaning that 95% of the time we're an automatic computer program that we're not even aware of, right? Now, what is that code that the subconscious mind runs off of? Because if it's not something you're aware of, how does it know what to do? It's literally like a hard drive of a computer. And that code is your beliefs. And basically, the way I like to describe the beliefs is they're just a story that you're telling yourself about how the world works or who you are as a person. Now, when did those beliefs get developed? Primarily in your childhood. Actually, 0 to 6 years old is the time frame in which you are the most impressionable and develop the most beliefs about your worldview and who you are as a person. But you can develop beliefs throughout time. And basically, you're just looking to your external world for evidence in your childhood about, okay, how does the world work and who are you as a person? And then those beliefs, you have to remember, like we said, the subconscious mind loves the familiar. It loves to stay safe and comfortable, wants to keep you alive. So, what is familiar? Your beliefs internally, your worldview. So actually, the way it thinks is what better way to survive and stay safe than to just continue doing what we've always done? What better way to to survive and stay safe than to confirm my deep-seated beliefs? Because if those two things match, then I'm comfortable. It's familiar. I can predict the future. Like I said, if it may not make me happy, but I at least I'll know what I'm gonna get. So that's the first thing is we have to realize that our beliefs are shaping our reality. And, you know, we actually want to go out and confirm our deep seated beliefs. So we can have beliefs that empower us and give us what we want, essentially, and make us have a really strong mindset. Or we can have beliefs that are very limiting. And unfortunately, in our childhood, no one's perfect. Our parents, they didn't have a manual of how to do this, right? So some things can happen in our external environment. We have a negativity bias where we actually put more weight into the negative things that happen because that is what has always kept us alive. Those could be threats. So a lot of what our beliefs are and how they've been developed are actually negative because we're just trying to stay alive. So there are some like wounds and there's some trauma that we all experienced in our upbringing that make us tell these stories in our head about how the world works, and we don't even really realize that they're limiting. I'll just give you a quick example of a limiting belief that you could have, let's say around money, that a lot of people have. A limiting belief in the story you're telling yourself could be, well, making an abundance of money is greedy and selfish because many people in the world don't have money, right? And this could have been taught by your parents or through your environment, right? How many of us got told money doesn't grow on trees and like, all this stuff. And then that becomes the story we tell ourselves. And then we literally run off this 95% of the time. And then we wonder why we subconsciously sabotage making money. And we can't make the money that we want to make is because we have this limiting belief and our subconscious literally conspires to try and confirm that deep seated belief. Of course, if that's what you're telling yourself all the time, you don't want to go out and make money because you don't want to be greedy and selfish. So that's really, what it is. Now, the next part of that question was, how do we change this? I'm just going to keep this really simple because we could do a whole weekend course on this. But you reprogram those beliefs actually in the same way in which you develop them, through the conscious mind. Okay, so we have to become aware and conscious of our unconscious patterns and beliefs. So I think it's Dr. Nicola Pera, she has this exercise she does where she says, just be a thought detective. And that's what I tell my clients. Be a thought detective for 30 days and just start to become conscious of your unconscious patterns. And you'll be like, holy smokes, I didn't know I was running off this pattern, telling myself these stories that aren't serving me. And just write them down. Write them down. Become conscious of them, write them down. And then what we want to do is tell yourself a different story, right? And this is called reframing, where you now become conscious in a moment when you're thinking that limiting belief. And when we become conscious of that unconscious belief, that's where it's malleable in the conscious mind. So we now have the conscious belief in our awareness, and then we reprogram and we retell ourselves a different story. Tell the narrative that you should be saying that will serve you. Like if it's the money one, tell yourself the story that I am worthy of money. Money is just an energy exchange, and I am worthy of it flowing abundantly into my life.
And how does connecting with our spiritual self? So I know that that's one of the practices that you ended up implementing with the changes that you made in your life. How does that part of ourselves assist in this transformation, in this rewiring?
Yeah, so okay. They're very tied together. And the reason being is because, and I like to look, there's so many places we could go with the spiritual stuff, but I like to, if we really want to talk about mindset and how it relates to spirituality, one of the fundamental principles, maybe we could call, of spirituality is to become aware of your ego, right? The ego. The ego, of course, is like your sense of self. It's this identity that you have. Like, I'm Kaylor Betts, and I'm a mental wealth coach, and I have a business, and I go on TV shows on the internet, and I have this many followers on Instagram. And, our ego is really powerful. And one of the fundamental principles of spirituality is to be conscious of that ego and aware of it, and to not be so tightly attached to it, because most people in society, they are their ego, like, all the time, and that there's no space that they've created. And part of the spiritual journey is to create that space, and to now all of a sudden be aware of that ego, and to realize that that's actually not me. Like, that's like this thing I've created in my subconscious mind, which is, again, all these beliefs about who you believe yourself to be. And you now are the observer of that ego, and there's a bunch of space. And that's what it's been spiritually for me. Oh, that's actually not me. I'm separate from that. I'm so much more than that, right? Like, that's just this made up picture in my head. And when you do that separation, well, think about how powerful that is. That shifts you into, now all of a sudden you're not reacting to all of the things in which your ego is thinking and all that, which oftentimes causes suffering, because we're so attached to, like, this outcome needs to be this way because my ego is this way. And you go from reacting all day long to now being able to be in the driver's seat and be able to respond consciously, right? Because you're not looking at everything of like, oh, this has to happen this way because my ego says so. It's like you can just
Mhm.
more so go with the flow of how the universe is unfolding life. And instead of, like, attaching to this picture in your head of the way you think things are supposed to be, and that's called surrender. And that'll change everything. And talk about upgrading your mindset. You get to a point where you can surrender to the things in which you can't control. Watch your performance, watch your life, your happiness go through the roof.
Mhm, mhm. Something else that for me is really standing out in what you're saying is the importance of being present in every moment. And that if we're so consumed with the past, which often the way the brain operates, it's always pumping the same narrative uh, on repeat, 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them the same as yesterday. So it keeps regurgitating that same thought process, that same belief system, and all of that. Is that in order to break away from that, we need to be present in every moment and to surrender, as you said, to what the present moment is showing us, and to not use, let's say, the bias of our past to inform what's happening. And this is the work that I'm doing right now a lot, is not to let the past taint my present moment. Because what happens is, in that safety that you talked about, it's always really then future tripping at the same time. It's always in future. The past is constantly informing our future. And in order to break that, we need to be present in every moment, to surrender, as you said, to what the gift that the present moment is giving us, and not allowing the past to continue to sabotage that by saying, well, I know that'll never work because when I tried it 10 years ago it didn't, or no, it'll never work because so and so told me that this is not really the way it's going to go, or no, it's not going to work because my dad told me I'll never amount to anything, and all of those other things that our past continues to damage our present, which really is damaging our future. That the biggest predictor of happiness in the future is how happy we can be now. And happiness exists in the now moment, but it's often we sabotage it by bringing the past into this. And we shouldn't. And that's what I wanted to say is that I hear that very much in what you're saying, that in order for us to do a lot of even the work that you're saying, it's important for us to be here now.
Yeah, and 100%. And I think maybe another way we can look at it is look at all of or most of the suffering that we do. Like when I say I was in a battle with my mind, if I relook at the first like 25 years of my life, 99.9% of the time I was suffering in imagination, not in reality. There were times where I was like really sick, in pain, like, but 99.9% of the time I was not actually suffering in reality. So that then means that where does our imagination come from? Our mind. So a lot of people call being present mindfulness, and I've heard a lot of spiritual teachers talk about how that's not the right way to put it. It's actually mindlessness. It's actually letting go of your mind, because that's where suffering is. And there's all this anxious chatter in our mind and anxious noise. And when you're in the moment, like if I'm really in the moment right now and I'm really like observing like you and really focusing on like what I'm saying, and I'm like present in my body in the space that I'm in right now, well, I'm not thinking about my sense of self. It literally is what will let go of my sense of self. I will tune into what is actually happening in the moment, and I also won't be thinking anxiously about the future or dwelling depressingly on the past in any way. So there's really no suffering 99.9% of the time in the moment unless the world is all coming down. So we need to let go of our mind in most moments. We need our mind sometimes, and there's a time
Mhm.
and a place for that when we're planning and stuff like that or whatever. But it really is to let go of that sense of self and to just be plugged into the moment, and it's an incredible thing that contributes to our happiness.
Taylor, I really appreciate you being on the show today and sharing all these amazing thoughts that really can, thoughts and ideas that can get us to be ask ourselves some important questions and to reevaluate and to take that step back as you did. Same thing for me. For me, it was the milestone of approaching 40 that had me taking a step back and reevaluating my life. But you brought so many amazing points today. If people want to connect with you after the show, how can they do that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I truly like I live for conversations like this, and I could truly talk all day with you about this. And
Mhm.
you know, the one thing I would just say is, and this leads into where people can find me is, that this is all like we just scratched the surface. If this is all like
Mhm.
really resonating with you, and this is like really, I hope you got some nuggets from it. But like, just keep diving into this stuff and keep watching the show, keep watching other listening to other podcasts, and following the right people who talk about this kind of stuff, and slowly but surely you all start to understand it, because it can be overwhelming at first, right? My recommendation is just pick one thing that we talked about today and focus on it. Maybe it's the thought detective exercise that we talked about. Maybe you're going to do that, or just pick one really actionable takeaway, and you'll be it'll serve you greatly. They can, here's what I would say is, you can certainly go over and listen to the Mental Wealth podcast. I mean, we talk a lot about this kind of stuff. It's on Apple and Google Play and Spotify. But Instagram is where that's my jam. Like I'm on there all the time. I post a lot of content. It's the Kaler Bets. So Taylor with a K. So the Kaler Betts, and Betts, and that's where people can find me on Instagram. And please message me, and we answer. I have some people helping me on my team, but we answer everyone.
Taylor, again, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing more about the importance of mindset and it really helping us to live the life that we want to be living, and the life that we're meant to live as well.
Yeah, and thank you for doing what you do. The world needs more of this kind of stuff.
Thank you. Stay tuned, as after the break, I'll be speaking with my guest, Dr. Matt, about having a success mindset. I'll see you after the break.
Solidity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing want to remind you about the importance of continuing to follow public health guidelines to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Please continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, and watch your distance. Please visit these sites for further information about how to stay safe from COVID-19 into the new year. Remember, love protects us.
Welcome back. I'm thrilled to introduce my next guest. He's a registered psychologist and psychotherapist and a leadership and mindset success coach. Dr. Matt Shorrock, hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, Teresa. It's so lovely to see you. And thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be on your show.
Let's begin by, if you could tell us where you are coming to us from.
Well, I'm actually based in Vienna, Austria, but I spent most of my life in the UK. And so I've been based in Austria now, which I like to call the heart of Europe, for it's going to be the 8th year this year. But for the first few decades of my life, I spent in the UK. So hence the accent.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to share that with everybody, because it's so glorious. And so I'm excited to spend the next half an hour listening to you for the accent and also for the information that you're going to share with us today. So Dr. Matt, may I call you that?
Yes,
Dr.
or Matt, okay. Dr. Matt or Matthew. I respond to all the above.
Okay, thank you. So if you could share a little bit with us about the work that you do with your clients.
So as you were very accurate with your introduction. My background is as a psychologist, and also I trained as a psychotherapist. So I've been in the helping professions now for, it's coming up close to 3 decades. And it's only in the past 10 years I've been working as a leadership and mindset coach. And so I work with professionals who are often the top of their game, they're peak performers, but they've plateaued, or they've burnt out. And so it's in the past 10 years I've felt most energetically aligned in supporting these people. And given that we're now based in Vienna, which is an international hub, we've got the United Nations based here. And so I work very closely with all the international companies and supporting their leaders and also the entrepreneurs that are based here and also worldwide.
That's fantastic. And so when you're dealing with, let's say, the top echelon of people that are successful, never mind just the rest of us, but you're working with the top, what are the limits then that you would think they may not have that many limiting beliefs that would maybe cause them to plateau or cause them not to continue to see more success in what they're doing? And so, in your opinion, what would be some of those limiting beliefs that are not only, let's say, plaguing the clients that you work with, but just everyone in general?
It's really interesting because it is all relative. I just happen to be working with, and it's not always the top, people who are top of the game. It's people with potential who are very, who are ambitious and working their way up. And one thing that unites us all are the limiting beliefs. And so one example that springs to mind would be one of my clients who to the outside world looks very successful. He was a multimillionaire businessman, but for the life of him, he couldn't close deals with billionaires. And they just happened to be the guy across the table, or the people across the table with a few extra zeros on their name, but he just in their account. But he just became very anxious when facing these people, and so it was fascinating because a real sort of conundrum, because to the outside world he's so successful, but inside he felt like a little child, a little baby opposite these people. And so it was through the deep mindset work that we did together that we realized that he's actually got some beliefs that stem back from childhood, and he was of course projecting authority figures. It was his father actually onto these people he'd never met before, and people just like you and me that just happened to have done well or been born into families where everything was gifted to them. And so it's the uncovering of those beliefs, working out where they came from. That's the first part of the work. And because they do lie subconscious for most people. And so that's the
Mm.
first stage, bringing them into awareness.
And are they,
Yeah.
so there's a difference between our subconscious beliefs and then our unconscious beliefs as well. So where do the beliefs lie? Are they in both parts of the mind, or are they more in one versus the other?
It's funny because, this subconscious, unconscious, they're used interchangeably. Some people will attempt to distinguish the two, but in reality, especially when it comes to treating, they may as well be the same. And
Mm.
so it's it's about just some people are semi-aware, you could say, of how they self-sabotage. So some people just self-sabotage and they don't know they're self-sabotaging, and other people will be aware, and they'll say to themselves, "Gosh, I've done that again. I keep repeating these patterns." So they're more aware. It's not so subconscious anymore, it's conscious. It may fall out of consciousness from time to time, hence them keep replaying these patterns. And so we try to get people to that level where at least there's a part of them that is aware of the beliefs that set them up for failure.
And that's the challenge, and
Does
that I
that
shared in my
make sense?
introduction. Yes, that research shows that we're operating 95% of the time in from the subconscious mind, that we're going through life on autopilot, not really
Yes.
aware of much of what we're doing every day, that there's only a 5% margin where we're actually conscious. And that also in my introduction, I shared that we have anywhere from between 48 to 60 thoughts a minute, and only six to
Yes.
eight of those thoughts are actually conscious ones. So most of the time we have this record that's just playing on repeat, that we're not even aware of, because it's just almost like playing in the background. And I think that that's the challenge, is that there's this operating system, this computer program that we're operating by every day, that it is difficult then to be able to identify what the limiting beliefs are, and that it does take a lot of work. So how can we become more, how can we make use of that 5%, as you said, for those people who slowly are awakening to those self-sabotaging, or a lot of them are just even false beliefs. They're not even real relevant ones that we play in our mind,
Yes,
and that
yes.
we operate by every day. So how can we become more conscious of those?
There are a number of ways. I mean, we could, some people will present themselves for therapy because the way they self-sabotage, or the thoughts that plague them, they become really problematic, and so they would need some professional support if it gets to that level of distress. um and it's not always necessary to go for therapy, because if we allow ourselves some space to be with ourselves on a daily basis, then we get to see these thoughts as they emerge, and they're just thoughts at the end of the day. They're just thoughts. The problem is we fuse to these thoughts, we attach to these thoughts as if they're real. So the thought might be, I'm really going to mess this up. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they're so attached to the thought. Whereas if we change our relationship to the thought, but only first through awareness, it's like you need to be aware that the thought is unhelpful, and we change our relationship to the thought, and we diffuse from the thought as opposed to fusing to it, then we stand a much better chance of being able to have a much better, fulfilling day, and not being distracted by these. In CBT, we call them negative automatic thoughts, negative, or NATs, which is a nice little name. NATs, it's like a little gnat just bugging you, plaguing you. But you need to be able to capture the gnat. You need to be aware, and just opening up that space, and I would say, routinely creating a space each day, for yourself, especially in this fast world that we live in. Yeah.
Yes, that's
And then we get to see which, yeah, yeah. I mean, so there's part of the answer to the question. It's a great question. And so, and there's so much more I could say about it, but please take me in the direction that we need to go.
no, and I love what you
I could
said,
go into
that it's
great depth.
just because it's a thought doesn't mean that we have to agree with it, right? And that also, in my introduction, I stated that from us, that we have our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self, and from our spiritual self, that we are whole and perfect and complete and powerful creators, capable of designing and manifesting the life of our dreams. But then we have these thoughts, and that I referred to an author named Michael Singer, who talks about in The Untethered Soul, the inner roommate, that it is this, and I call it the negative Nelly, because I find that it is often, for my own experience, this negative Nelly that just spews things at me. And now I've been able to detach from that voice and understand that that's not me, and that I'm a powerful creator, but this voice is saying otherwise, and I don't have to listen to that voice, and that voice is not actually me. So I can appreciate what you're saying there, because just because we're having them, we don't have to identify with that voice, that we can see ourselves apart from that and identify that as just the brain, the organ that just keeps going on repeat with these thoughts, that it's designed to do that. But we don't have to believe every single thing that it's saying, especially if it doesn't feel good.
Yes, exactly. I like to think, I suppose the metaphor of a road, and we're driving along in a car or a van, and there are people in the back, and it could be Naughty Nelly, or what's yours called? Nelly.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot the
Negative,
Naughty
negative
Nelly,
now.
and negative Nelly. That's it. And so she's whispering. It's like, drive into that ditch just there. And so you can drive into the ditch, of course you can. And this is what people who are subconscious, who are not fully aware of these gnats, these negative Nellies, we drive into the ditch. But if you change the relationship and you just see it as a thought, then you are then in a much better position as the driver to say, thank you, I hear you, but I'm just going to continue driving along this path. this path represents my values. Yeah.
So it
And so
takes that
it's
redirection.
yes, yes. It gives one a meta perspective. When we change that direction, we get to be grounded in our adults. Because often, we talked about past programming. Often these voices, these thoughts, stem from programming that we've received in the past.
Mhm.
And so this takes us
And
back into the present moment.
mhm. Yes, yes, and being able to ask ourselves, is it true? And that's like you said, to be able to take the step back so that we can do that, but we don't often take a moment to reflect on on what that thought might be and whether it's serving us, whether it's
Mm,
true. Why do I believe that?
mm,
Asking ourselves. And I don't know, what
yes.
kind of questions maybe do you ask your clients when they go and say something to you that you're able to identify as a limiting belief? But what are some questions then that you might encourage your clients to ask themselves when something does come up?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. So one way is to ask them, does every part of you believe that? Does every part of you believe that? Are you 100% invested in that, in the belief in that thought? Or maybe 99%? And when they say, you know, it's probably 99%. And then I'll say, well, can I just speak to that 1%? And it's a good question to ask yourself. And and that can be facilitated simply by keeping a diary, journaling, seeing ourselves as parts. There's a part of me that thinks this, there's a part of me that thinks that, and owning those parts. And when we do that, we bring them both into awareness and we own them, our dark side, or our shadow side, you might call it. And, through the process of writing or talking, we get to integrate those into the fore of our mind, so that so then we can ask ourselves, so really, what do I want? What do I really want? And what are the options here?
Mhm, mhm. Now, if from a spiritual perspective, if our spirit side is connected to that higher intelligence about ourselves, or true and authentic selves, where it is our original nature, it's like when we came and were born into this world, we are that love, peace, and happiness, but then the world very slowly takes us away from that. Is that how can we tap into that higher intelligence that
Mm,
knows that we are perfect and whole and complete
yes,
and healed, that
yes,
there is where
yes,
our invincibility is held, our
yes,
superpowers
yes,
are held? How do you tap into that
yes,
inner knowledge?
yes. And so I suppose the simplest way to well, in a nutshell, I would say, cultivate a spiritual practice, you know, and that might look like, routinizing mindfulness practice on a daily basis, or meditation, practicing yoga, um, being in nature. But when you enter that space, then you get to hear those inner whispers. You get to see those signs. You get to tap into that synchronicity. Where it's like, gosh, I was just thinking about that person, and then they've just texted me. If we're so busy, sort of, going about our day, we don't see these little signs and synchronicities that are sending us messages, pointing us in the direction that we need to go to self-actualize and be the fullest expression of ourselves.
Mhm. Why is it that there's this deep down feeling of, it's a self-worth, right? That we're not enough, we're not worthy. Why and there's a lack of self-love there. In your opinion, because 3 decades you've been doing this, why is it seems that there's this at the core of everybody,
Mm, mm,
and that it's
mm.
something that we have to rewrite. We have to reprogram ourselves to know otherwise. But all of us are
Yes.
plagued with it at some level inside of us.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And often it's because we're not taking care of ourselves, so it keeps coming back to haunt us. We keep putting ourselves in stressful situations, It's like, going back to my materially successful client, the guy with the millions, you know, he was wanting more. He was in search of something more. And so he was on the path of never enoughness. He wasn't really sort of discovering his deeper purpose in life. He was just chasing the zeros. And so we can get caught in these perpetually unfulfilling processes if we're not careful. And so then that comes back to sort of creating that space, working out what it is that we really want. For example, when clients come to me, they say, especially people who have achieved great things and they want to achieve more abundance, and they'll first of all articulate it in a materialistic sense. And I'll flip the question. I'll say, why is that important? Why are those few extra zeros important? And then we get into an analysis of their values. What do they truly hold dear? What kind of impact do they really want to make on the world? And then we can start having even more meaningful conversations of how they can serve people and elevate other people, or even just their families. Make a difference, make a legacy in the world, leave a legacy.
Yeah. Just with our families. Sometimes we think that we have to do big and grandiose things, opening schools in
No.
Africa and being missionaries and everything, and we neglect the people that are closest to us, that have been given to us. Let's
Yeah.
say, like for me, my children given to me to make my greatest difference. As you said, like the
Mm,
legacy,
mm,
my
mm,
legacy is with them.
mm,
The
mm,
people who
mm,
they
mm,
end up becoming is where I get my greatest happiness is tied into the children, the beings that my children are becoming, and
mm,
how and me
mm,
as a
mm.
guide and what part I've played in that, and that we often overlook that because we think we're supposed to be doing big things for strangers, and not recognizing that really, because we're all one, that even when we affect those that are closest to us, we are actually affecting the collective. So we are making a grander difference, even though we may not think we are.
That's you articulated that so beautifully, and I couldn't agree with you more. I too have children, and just to be able to help shape their thinking, help open their minds, open their hearts, so the work continues long after I'm gone, through our children, and the millions of contacts that they'll have in the world, how they touch other people's souls, it just has this wonderful exponential effect. And it's especially to a lot of women who have worked with in the past that have really struggled with raising children, and yeah, sort of leaving a career, and they're wanting to have this great big plan, this big sort of impact on the world, and th- they're very quickly reminded that actually they're, they're ahead of the game. They've already made a massive, profound difference in the world. Anything else is just a bonus, really.
Yes, yes, I agree. I feel like exactly like that. Dr. Matt, I think what I really love about having you on the show today is that you have both sides, right? That as a coach, you see it from a wholeness, let's say, um, a whole well-being approach, and then you have also the more of the kind of clinical medical approach. So it's interesting that you've been able to meld the two, and I'm assuming that you see benefit in doing that by being able to recognize that there's more than just our physical, mental, emotional component to ourselves, but there is also that spiritual part that we can
Yes,
use to nourish and guide us.
absolutely. If it wasn't for the spiritual awakenings I've had, I don't think I'd be able to go out into the world and do what I do so potently. And I hope that doesn't sound conceited. This is the feedback that I get. People's lives are affected quite deeply from the work that we do, and it's only because and there's not time to go into this today, but through my own spiritual awakenings.
Mm, thank you. Now,
And so it's
Dr. Matt,
thinking
if
more,
people like
yeah.
If people would love to connect with you after the show, how can they do that?
So they could email me. They could, I, I, so you can contact me through our website. So that's themindinstitute.at. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So I think that the handle is at Dr. Matt Shorrock, and also on Instagram at Dr. Matt Shorrock. And most recently, I've been having a lot of fun on TikTok. And again, and it's such a powerful medium, really. I see it as the future. Lots of professionals are jumping onto TikTok. It's really taking off professionals. So move over, the young people. We're taking over, or we're joining you. And so that also is at Dr. Matt Shorrock. So there's lots of different ways you can reach me.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so cute that you're on. I can't wait to check out those videos and what you're creating there. So I'm definitely going to go and check that out. I want to thank you so much for being on the show today and speaking to us about how we can really realign ourselves with who we really are by understanding the innate potential that we have within us and becoming more critical of anything that really speaks against that.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Teresa. Thank you for having me. Really. Thank you.
I'm going to leave you with the thought for the day. If we're going to be happier people, then we must take a more active approach to design the life we want. So, how do we want to do that? Well, with dedication, consistency, and rewiring, we can reprogram our minds with thoughts that reawaken our innate potential to be who we really are. The first step is awareness, becoming aware of the thoughts and beliefs that aren't serving you and have you living a life you're unhappy with. Next is deciding what do you want and focusing on it by giving your brain direction. What do you want physically, emotionally, and spiritually in your professional and personal life? Then it's making a commitment to do away with any negative and limiting beliefs about yourself, to change the paradigms that have you playing it small, and to change a fixed mindset to a growth mindset instead. Last, it's taking consistent action to consciously take the thoughts we do want to have and plant them in place of the old belief. Taking steps like rewriting the programming in our minds with empowering beliefs and positive affirmations about ourselves, our goals, and the aspects we want to change about our lives. Moving towards the life you truly want all starts with making a conscious choice to be present and aware of your thoughts, beliefs, and actions in every moment, and redirect your focus on taking the steps required to make your life, a wonderful masterpiece. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, and I look forward to being with you again next week.
To connect with Teresa Greco after the show for coaching, workshops, and speaking engagements, you can visit her website at teresagreco.ca or by email at stepstotruehappiness@gmail.com or follow her on Instagram at teresagreco_steps to happiness or on Facebook at Steps to True Happiness with Teresa Greco.